and seen on video.
Yeah, I watched it about a dozen times or so last night and again this morning. I'm just not comfortable with Patrick's behavior around the ball.
Patrick Reed won the Masters tournament, one of golf's most prestigious championships. He represented the United States in multiple Ryder Cups with exceptional performances that earned him the nickname Captain America. He's accumulated 9 PGA Tour victories and millions of dollars in career earnings. Yet he's become one of the most disliked figures in professional golf, with fans frequently cheering his failures rather than his successes. Understanding how a green jacket winner became golf's most prominent villain requires examining a pattern of controversies spanning his entire career, from college dismissal through rules disputes to defamation lawsuits, each incident building on the last until his reputation became defined more by controversy than achievement. If you find this examination of one of golf's most polarizing figures compelling, hit that like button, leave a comment with your perspective on Reed's career, and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth analysis of the stories behind sports headlines. Patrick Nathaniel Reed was born August 5th, 1990 in San Antonio, Texas, and raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. From early age, his golf talent was evident. Between 2005 and 2007 at University High School in Baton Rouge, he led his team to consecutive state championships, earned state medalist honors, achieved Rolex Junior All-American recognition, and won the Junior Open Championship in 2006. His competitive intensity and technical skills marked him as a prospect with legitimate professional potential. That same intensity that made him successful on the course would later contribute to his controversial reputation. Reed's college career began at the University of Georgia, one of the nation's elite golf programs. He arrived with substantial expectations and the skills to meet them. However, after just 1 year, he was dismissed from the team under circumstances that remain somewhat unclear but have been subject to extensive speculation and reporting. According to Shane Ryan's book about the Ryder Cup, some teammates accused Reed of rules violations and creating team discord. Specific allegations suggested improper behavior during qualifying rounds, though nothing was formally proven or resulted in official sanctions beyond his dismissal from the team. Reed has consistently maintained that his departure from Georgia resulted from violating alcohol-related team rules rather than any form of cheating or dishonesty on the golf course. The distinction matters because alcohol violation, while serious in team context, represent standard disciplinary issues rather than integrity questions central to golf's ethical foundation. However, the ambiguity surrounding his departure and the persistence of teammate allegations created lasting questions about what actually occurred. In golf culture, where personal integrity and honest self-policing of rules are foundational values, even unproven allegations of rules violations can permanently affect reputation. Following his Georgia dismissal, Reed transferred to Augusta State University, where his career took a dramatically positive turn. He became instrumental in leading Augusta State to 2 NCAA national championships, demonstrating that whatever happened at Georgia, his competitive ability remained elite. These championships validated his talent and suggested he could function effectively within team structure. However, the shadow of the Georgia controversy followed him. Once a player's name becomes associated with integrity questions, even without definitive proof, the association tends to persist, particularly in golf's culture, where reputation for honesty matters enormously. Reed turned professional in 2011, but before establishing his tour career, personal family issues became public in ways that added another layer to his developing public image. In his early 20s, Reed made the decision to distance himself from his parents and sister. When he married Justine Corain, his family was not invited to the wedding, an absence that drew attention given typical family involvement in such significant life events. The situation escalated during the 2014 US Open when Reed's parents and sister attended using tickets obtained through a friend but were reportedly asked to leave after Justine. Reed allegedly requested event officials remove them. The family estrangement became even more prominent during Reed's greatest professional achievement. When he won the 2018 Masters tournament, his parents were not present and reportedly were not permitted through Augusta National's gate. The specific details and causes of the family rift remain private, with neither Reed nor his parents providing complete public explanation. However, the public nature of the estrangement, particularly its visibility at major tournaments and his Masters victory, added complexity to Reed's public perception. Observers struggle to understand how family relationships could deteriorate to such public alienation. alienation, and in absence of explanation, the situation contributes to general perception of Reed as a difficult or problematic personality. Despite personal controversies, Reed's professional golf game continued developing impressively. He began winning PGA Tour events and rose in world rankings. During this period, he made a statement that would define how many people perceived his personality. He declared that he believed he was among the top 5 players in the world, despite being ranked 44th at the time. In golf culture, where understatement and humility are traditionally valued, such overt self-promotion struck many observers as arrogant or inappropriate. Some fans and commentators appreciated his confidence, viewing it as the self-belief necessary for elite competition. Others saw it as cocky and disrespectful to players ranked above him, who had achieved more. Reed's confidence proved partially justified as he continued winning and climbing rankings. However, the statement established a pattern where his personality and self-promotion became as much part of his story as his performance. In the context of golf's traditional culture, his approach stood out as different from most tour professionals, who typically emphasize respect for competition and downplay personal accomplishments in public statements. Reed's Ryder Cup performances provided some of his career's most positive moments, representing the United States in 2014, 2016, and 2018. He compiled an impressive record and demonstrated particular effectiveness in the pressure-filled match play format. His intensity, emotional displays, and clutch shot-making earned him the nickname Captain America, initially a positive moniker suggesting his value to the American team. His peak Ryder Cup moment came at Hazeltine in 2016 during a singles match against Rory McIlroy, one of golf's biggest stars. Reed won the match in dramatic fashion, punctuated by fist pumps and emotional reactions that energized American fans and teammates. These Ryder Cup performances demonstrated Reed's ability to excel in golf's highest pressure team environment. Unlike stroke play tournaments where players compete individually over 4 days, Ryder Cup matches feature head-to-head competition with national pride and team dynamics intensifying every shot. Reed's success in this format showed legitimate competitive toughness and skill under circumstances where many talented players struggle. For a period, his Ryder Cup excellence seemed to balance his controversial aspect, providing evidence of positive qualities that teammates and captains valued. The 2018 Masters victory represented Reed's career pinnacle. He held off strong challenges from Ricky Fowler and Jordan Spieth to win his first and to date only major championship. Winning the Masters is among golf's ultimate achievements, conferring lifetime membership in the game's elite circle. The green jacket Reed received at Augusta National is one of sport's most recognizable symbols of excellence. For a brief period following his Masters win, the controversy surrounding Reed seemed less relevant. He had achieved something undeniable that only a small percentage of professional golfers ever accomplish. However, the respite was temporary. Later in 2018, at the Hero World Challenge, cameras captured Reed taking practice swings in a sandy waste area before hitting his shot. The footage appeared to show him moving sand behind his ball twice, which, if intentional, would constitute improving his lie, a clear rules violation. Reed immediately defended his actions, arguing that camera angles made the incident look worse than it was and that he had not intentionally improved his lie. He received a 2-stroke penalty, but the damage to his reputation was far more severe than the scoring penalty. Golf Channel analyst Brandel Chambly directly called Reed's actions cheating on air, a remarkably strong statement from a prominent commentator about a tour professional. Chambly's accusation ignited extensive debate across golf media and social media. Other players also weighed in, with Cameron Smith making pointed comments about having no sympathy for cheaters and questioning Reed's explanation that blamed camera angle. The incident revived all the old allegations from his college days. People who had given Reed benefit of doubt regarding Georgia began reconsidering. The pattern of alleged rules issues across different stages of his career made the Hero World Challenge incident seem potentially part of a longer history rather than an isolated mistake. The controversy highlighted a fundamental tension in Reed's relationship with golf's rules and culture. Golf uniquely requires players to call penalties on themselves for violations that officials or competitors might not observe. The game's integrity depends on honest self-policing. When players appear to push rule boundaries or benefit from ambiguous situations, it violates cultural expectations even if no technical rule is broken. Reed's defenders argued he received only a 2-stroke penalty, suggesting officials determined he hadn't committed serious violations. Critics argued that receiving any penalty, combined with the pattern of similar similar incidents demonstrated problematic approach to rules. In 2021, another controversial rule situation occurred at the Farmers Insurance Open. Reed's ball landed in rough and he claimed it was embedded, entitling him to free relief. He took relief before a rules official could examine the original ball position. When an official arrived, Reed had already marked the spot and picked up the ball, making it impossible to verify whether it had truly been embedded. Television footage showed the ball had bounced before coming to rest, which typically indicates it would not be embedded. Technically, Reed followed the procedure for taking embedded ball relief, and officials allowed his ruling to stand. However, the optics were poor. He benefited from a favorable ruling that couldn't be verified after the fact, and the bouncing ball footage suggested the embedded ball claim was questionable. This incident again exemplified the pattern that made Reed so controversial. He hadn't definitively broken a rule, but the situation looked suspicious. He benefited from the ruling, and verification was impossible due to how he handled the situation. For critics, it represented another example of Reed finding gray areas and benefiting from ambiguity. For defenders, it showed him being unfairly scrutinized for following proper procedures. The reality likely falls somewhere between these interpretations, but the pattern of similar incidents across his career made neutral evaluation increasingly difficult. In 2022, Reed made a surprising decision that dramatically escalated his controversial status. He joined LIV Golf, the Saudi-backed rival league that had fractured professional golf. While numerous prominent players joined LIV, Reed's move felt particularly significant given his already controversial reputation. He then filed a $750 million defamation lawsuit against Golf Channel and several analysts, including Brandel Chambly, alleging they had conducted a coordinated campaign to damage his reputation through false statements about his character and conduct. The lawsuit represented Reed actively fighting back against years of criticism and negative coverage. His legal team argued that media figures had repeatedly made defamatory statements that damaged his professional reputation and earning potential. However, public reaction was largely negative. Most observers viewed the lawsuit as an attempt to silence legitimate criticism rather than address actual defamation. Filing such an enormous lawsuit while simultaneously joining the sport's most controversial organization made Reed appear defensive and vindictive rather than wrong. The lawsuit eventually saw several claims dismissed or withdrawn, though Reed's legal team continued asserting they were fighting against media bias. The LIV Golf decision itself carried enormous significance. The league's Saudi backing and its disruption of professional golf's established structure made it deeply controversial. Players who joined faced criticism for accepting money from a regime with documented human rights issues, for undermining the PGA Tour that had made their careers possible, and for prioritizing personal profit over golf's traditional structure. Reed joining LIV added another controversial chapter to his career. He was now not just the player with rules, controversies, and family drama. He was also part of golf's most divisive development in decades. Throughout 2023 and 2024, Reed continued competing in LIV events while making occasional appearances in major championships where LIV players remained eligible. His performances were mixed, with occasional strong showings including at the Masters that reminded observers of his undeniable talents. However, every appearance seemed to generate new controversy. At a Dubai tournament, he was involved in an incident where he reportedly threw a tee in Rory McIlroy's direction on the practice range after McIlroy didn't acknowledge a greeting. The incident, captured on camera and widely discussed on social media, added another example of Reed's seeming inability to avoid controversial moments. At the 2023 Dubai Desert Classic, Reed hit a wild tee shot into palm trees and insisted he had spotted his ball in a specific tree, allowing him to take a drop directly below. Video replay suggested the ball might have landed in a different tree entirely, which would change where relief should be taken. Reed stood by his version, officials accepted his ruling, and he proceeded under that determination. Once again, he benefited from a favorable interpretation in a situation where verification was impossible after the fact. For critics, it was yet another example of the pattern they had observed throughout his career. For defenders, it represented him being subjected to unfair scrutiny that other players didn't face. By this point, Reed's reputation had solidified to where almost anything he did received interpretation through the lens of his controversial history. Defenders argued he was being held to different standards than other players, and that minor incidents were being magnified because of his reputation reputation. Critics argued that the pattern of incidents across 15 years of competitive golf demonstrated fundamental issues with how he approached rules and competition. The truth likely contains elements of both perspectives. Reed probably does receive more scrutiny than players with cleaner reputations, but that increased scrutiny exists because of legitimate concerns based on documented incidents throughout his career. From a broader perspective, Reed's career raises interesting questions about golf's culture and how the sport handles players who operate in ethical gray areas. Golf prides itself on integrity and personal honesty. Players are expected to call penalties on themselves even when no one else would know. This honor system works remarkably well most of the time, but it creates particular challenges when players approach rules in ways that seem technically compliant but ethically questionable. Reed has rarely, if ever, been found guilty of definitively breaking rules. Yet the pattern of ambiguous situations that tend to resolve in his favor has created widespread belief that he pushes boundaries in ways that violate golf's unwritten codes, even when not violating written rules. The question of whether Reed is misunderstood or simply unapologetically himself remains open to interpretation. His defenders argue he's being unfairly targeted for having confidence, for competing aggressively, and for not conforming to golf's traditional culture of false modesty. They point out that he's never been suspended or sanctioned for serious rules violations, suggesting the criticism exceeds any actual wrongdoing. Critics argue that the sheer volume of incidents, the consistency of the pattern, and the way situations repeatedly benefit him demonstrate an approach to competition that violates golf's fundamental values, even if it doesn't technically break specific rules. Reed himself has generally maintained that he's simply a confident competitor who plays within the rules and doesn't deserve the criticism he received. In occasional interviews where he's discussed the controversies, he's suggested that he's being held to different standards because of personality rather than action. He's portrayed himself as someone who doesn't fit golf's traditional mold and faces criticism for that difference rather than for any actual wrongdoing. This self-perception contains validity. His confident, aggressive personality does differ from golf's traditional culture, and that difference likely contributes to negative reaction. However, it doesn't fully account for the specific rules incidents that form the core of criticisms against him. The family estrangement adds another dimension that makes comprehensive evaluation of Reed's character difficult. Without knowing the specific causes and circumstances of his break with his parents and sister, observers cannot determine whether those relationships' dissolution reflects negatively on Reed or whether legitimate reasons justify the estrangement. The public nature of the rift makes it relevant to his overall story, but the private details that would allow informed judgment remain unknown. Looking at Reed's career comprehensively reveals both undeniable accomplishments and persistent controversy. He's a Masters champion, which automatically places him among golf's elite. His 9 PGA Tour victories demonstrate consistent excellence. His Ryder Cup performances showed competitive toughness in golf's most pressure-filled team environment. These achievements are real and significant. Simultaneously, the pattern of rules controversies, the college dismissal, the family estrangement, the defamation lawsuit, and the countless smaller incidents that have accumulated over 15 years create legitimate grounds for questioning his approach to competition and his relationship with golf's cultural values. Reed has become rare in modern sport, a genuinely polarizing figure where the villain label feels earned not through a single catastrophic mistake, but through accumulated incidents that individually might be defensible, but collectively create an overwhelming pattern. Whether he ultimately deserves the intense negativity he receives remains debatable, but the fact that he generates such strong reactions reflects something real about how his career has unfolded. In a sport that prizes honor, integrity, and humble excellence, Reed has carved a path defined by confidence, controversy, and constant conflict with the game's traditional culture. His legacy will likely always contain both his undeniable achievements and the equally undeniable controversies that made him golf's most complicated modern figure.